Welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of You Are Inevitable limited series podcast that we have decided to make longer. So we're not quite sure what limited means, but we're having so much fun. We want to just keep having conversations. So it's me, Kathleen, Seeley, and my partner in crime, Natalie, Alexia, and we call ourselves two very seasoned coaches with 60 years of combined experience. Life, love, academia, lots of coaching, training, laughter, tears, lots of life behind us, and still hopefully much more ahead of us. But we're here to try to challenge your perspective, inspire you to recognize that you have everything in you to become the architect of your own life and shape it the way you want it. And these are disruptive, hopefully disruptive, not in a mean way, but just kind of shake up your thinking in these conversations. And we have we bring up a topic and we just kind of go where it goes. With the goal of helping you come up with maybe a renewed sense of self-confidence or empowerment to feel like you can really be the architect of your own life. You can feel free to comment or ask questions all the way through. KDB, good to see you. And for those of you listening later, please like us, comment, rate us, whatever. So I have a bit of a cold today, and share it. And, it's you'll get the replay and feel free to share it with anyone you like. But today, go ahead. Yeah.
I love how the please like us sounded so directive.
Yeah. Please like us, please, because we're talking about, our topic today is boundaries and bridges, balancing the self with the world. We're going to explore connections that shape our lives and the world around us. So we're going to just dive right in. And the real question we're talking about sort of is, how do our connections with others shape our understanding of ourselves in the world? Because here's the thing. I don't know how I am in the world until I interact in it, because I need to get feedback. Where do I go and like you? Spotify, or where else are we?
I think Apple Podcasts. If you listen on there, or Spotify, it's in both places. I don't know if it's magically anywhere else, but I definitely know it's in those two places.
You would think we should know. We'll get a message from Carson pretty soon, who's behind the scenes. Thank you, Harvey. So I would suggest to you that it's really the space between us where relationships live. And it's the connection, and to be more consciously and unconsciously recognize that these connections exist. And as we broaden our network, complexity increases. And what I mean by that, and we're going to probably talk about this a little bit later into it, but we kind of show up differently to different groups of people. And most likely we have sort of a different approach or a different affect when we're with different groups of people. And the more people we're around, or the more situations, it becomes more complex. So that's why it's so important to know ourselves, right, Natalie? It's so important to know who we are. And many of you who interact with me know that values are the core to what we do, and our values underpin everything we do. So if we're more clear on our values, we recognize our beliefs, we can be grounded in who we are no matter the situation. So that's kind of high level. But Natalie, just to turn it to you for a second, we talked in our previous episode about how our stories and assumptions we carry can define our lives in the context of relationships. How is this true?
Yes. So I thought this was a great thread for us to pull. For those of you that listened, like Kathleen said, we talked about this before. How are the stories that we're telling ourselves impacting our life? And I think this is really, really true for relationships as well. And I think it's useful for us to generate awareness as to what stories are running as and when we are interacting with people, whether that's interacting with a group of strangers, interacting with our family, interacting with our children. And just to give some examples, I've shared this with, I'm going to be very vulnerable here. I've shared this with my children before and they've laughed at me, but I, for the longest time, have said to them, they have nerves. Actually, my youngest just went back to school yesterday, first day back at school. And as is normal, anxiety, raising 3 kids, many moments when anxiety pops up about being around others. And I've told my children, I generally work from this assumption that most people like me. And in my head, I just always thought, well, this is how, the lens through which Natalie views the world. And so therefore, this is probably the lens through which most people views the world. Turns out, not accurate. But it does impact the experience I have, as does all of the assumptions and stories that we are carrying with us into different relational environments. So one of the other ones that I wanted to bring up was I have a mentor who I love. David Wood, excellent trainer. And when I was spending a lot of time around him and when we were working together, he might be one of the best people person that I have ever encountered. And that would be irrespective of where we were and whoever we were talking to. If it was the person at the counter at the airport, if it was someone serving coffee, if it was someone that we happened to walk past on the street, he had this ability to really create connection with people, really create conversation with people, and generate these very rich and surprising interactions, felt like almost out of the blue. And I once asked him about it, and he said to me, well, my secret is I treat everyone as if they were my best friend. He said, that's just what I think of when I'm talking to them. If I'm at the counter, at the airport, if I come across someone, if I'm sitting next to someone at the bar, I just treat them as if I'm talking to my best friend. And I find that when I do that, what you're witnessing is what happens. And so these are some of the stories and assumptions that it's possible that we carry into these relational experiences, but other ones as well, of course, could be on the other side of the spectrum. Like for a long time, and I'm attempting to let go of this one, is my children never want to learn anything from me. I have a story that my children never want to learn anything from me. They'd much rather learn things from other people, but it does impact the way that we communicate. And it also impacts the energy with which I enter a conversation, when my hope is that they will learn something from me, but my assumption is that they don't want to. Other people could have, nobody likes me. I've heard someone before who says, oh, whenever I join a group, the conversation stops. Nobody, from a training perspective, actually, I had a conversation with another trainer the other day, and I gave her the feedback that when you ask people to share, I get this feeling that you don't think anybody is going to share in a group training scenario. And she said, well, I don't think anybody is going to share. I don't think they want to share. And I said, yes, you can tell. So yes, some of the ways. Sorry, Kathleen, you go.
No, that just really, I had made a note here because it got me thinking about energetically, people can pick up on our cues consciously or subconsciously when we walk in a room. And I work lots. We both work lots in the leadership space. And I say, you as a leader, you set the tone. So be really aware of where you are energetically, because you're powerful and you set the vibe. So
yeah.
to speak. Yeah.
100%. And I think from a training perspective as well, when we've done different things where we've been training other trainers, one of the things I'll always share with them is, like, people generally speaking will match your energy. So if you come in anxious, or if you come in like happy and upbeat and energized, you can see that there's, some shift in the energy of the room as you maintain that as the leader, if you're conscientious about maintaining, the kind of feeling that you want to have continue in your training room.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I'm getting off on a tangent, but that would not be unusual. But also as a trainer, that like to be conscious of, keeping sort of modulation in the emotion. It can always be up, can always be down. If it's flatlining, then it's boring. But yeah, so just noticing that the topic is about barriers and bridges, but that we emote, as KDB says, we emote, we give off a energy.
Yes. And when we're thinking about those bridges too, really, as we kind of just put in this moment around stories and assumptions, it's a point of reflection, or an invitation to reflect. What energy am I bringing with me? What stories am I bringing into the room? Like we said in the beginning, whether it's a great big room full of strangers, or someone that you have a challenging relationship with, or your children or friends or whomever, what stories come with me? Because they do impact the bridges that we get to build with people.
Yeah, and the barriers, right? It's like we are at the center of every relationship, but we are not the center of every relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what do you think, Kathleen, about, we're talking about bridges, we're talking about relationships between us and others. What do you think that we generally hear? What messaging do we hear around what it takes to be successful in today's world? And how does that connect to what we're talking about?
Yeah, so I think a lot about this because I remember through COVID, we offered a program called Aligned, and it was, happiness, fulfillment, and success on your own terms. Because what makes me happy or feel fulfilled could be different than you. But I do think there has been an overarching message of success is more individualistic or competitive, and it might be my age, it might be different. I'm broadening my the people I connect with. I don't know. It could have been around all along. Who knows? But you notice when you notice. But a slight shift from this competitive, individualistic to more a collective. I remember, like, I think Jack says, maybe he's not the only one that says it, Jack Canfield, if you don't know who we're talking about, but success is a team sport, which is totally true. But I'm thinking years ago when I was in 7th, 8th grade, I went to basketball camp in Pullman, Washington. And the coach, I can't remember his name, but he had on his door a sign, if it is to be, it's up to me. And I felt that very motivational. Like, that really inspired me. It's like, yeah, this life is up to me. If people sort of looked at the roadmap of my life, it could have gone in any direction. So if it is to be, it's up to me. And so I took that with me, and that sort of that more individualistic perspective. But what I think about now, as I've gone through more of my life, is like, but there's 5 people on a basketball team. I got to pass the ball. I need defense. I need, and then there's 5 others on the other side, and there wouldn't be a win if they weren't there. So it like what I always look for sort of metaphors for my own self-understanding, but it's like, it isn't individual. If it is to be, it's up to me, but it's also collective. We can't do anything without others, ever, 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 ever. Because even when I go to bed, someone made the mattress, so everything is relationship. This isn't news, but what's helpful to recognize that is, if I want to be in relationship with other people, I have to have some level of self-awareness of what energy I'm giving off, who I am, how I impact people, and how they impact me, because it's that space between us that we sort of get a view of ourselves in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I think one of the interesting things is, when we are around different types of people, I believe most of us listening can relate to this idea that different people bring out different aspects of self. Mm-hmm. I have very good friends who don't live near me. And whenever I go to visit them, I notice that we have these very expansive conversations. Actually, that's how I feel about these conversations that you and I get to have too. But we get to have these very expansive conversations that go off in all these directions. And that part of me that is capable of having expansive conversations doesn't go on vacation. It's always around. It's always a part of me. And then there are certain interactions that bring out that flavor. And yes, so I want us to talk about this nuance between our ability to be flexible and bring out these different aspects of self when we're relating to other people, and then this idea too that on the other side of that could live self-abandoning.
Yeah, it's a fine line, right? It's not completely giving up myself so I, quote, fit in, holding on to a piece of myself. But if I want to be in a relationship, I do have to learn to be flexible on my preferences. Now I'm going to go into a little bit of theory for a minute. Some of you might like it. Some might go, oh, good God. But I was introduced to a theory called FIRO theory, fundamental interpersonal relations orientation, 20 some plus years ago. Changed my life. Will Schutz, called the human element. Anyway, he suggests that we operate on 3 dimensions of behavior: a preference for inclusion, a preference for control, and a preference for openness. Inclusion means being with people, how much I want to be with people, how much I want to be alone. Control is how much I want to influence or be influenced by. So control in a positive aspect. They all have negative aspects, by the way. And openness, how willing am I to be open and transparent? So that we all we have a little bit of all 3 in all of us, but we have to be in a relationship, we need to be flexible. And to give a really good example of this using that framework, which is how I sort of like see the world in many ways, is like for example, shocking to many people who know me in the world, I have a very low preference for inclusion. I like to be alone. When I go to a party, I could stay and talk with one person the whole night. I have no need to be a social butterfly. I don't need to be seen. And then here I go and speak on stages. But I have a low preference for inclusion. And so, but if I want to be in relationship, with people, I have to be flexible on that preference, because what I found over the years, particularly when I got divorced, I would never go out and do things, and then people stopped inviting me. So then I was pissed off because I wasn't getting invited. I mean, there's just no making me happy. And so what I realized is, I have to be flexible in my preference for inclusion because I want to be invited. So what I did is I started having a group of women over about every 6 weeks to my house. We'd play Cards Against Humanity, drink wine, eat lots of bad food, sit in the hot tub, whatever. And then I started to get invited again. And so I think that sometimes we go on extremes to sort of keep ourselves feeling safe. But the other side of that coin is, if I'm always socializing, I can't recharge. So in a sense, that could be like self-abandoning. I'm giving up all of who I am to make other people happy. So it's about being flexible. And control, just to finish off the framework, if this is of interest to anyone, Isabella, I think you know this framework quite well. But control is having influence over, or being in charge of, or people being in charge. And it's like, if I'm always deciding what we do, that could get a little old for people. And I also, can get high on control. And what I've learned since hiring and working with more people in my company wanting to let go of control, I really have to watch myself to not control processes or not control ideas, because the only way to grow and expand is to be flexible. And then the final one is openness. Some people, they'll tell you everything about them in the beginning, and it's sort of like, either you like me or you don't, whatever, I don't care, which isn't true, but that's another podcast session. Or I'll tell you nothing and you tell me. So being flexible on openness, it's like, if I'm sharing with someone all kinds of things and they don't give me anything back, then I start to get suspicious. And I know, Natalie, we went through a period of this. Maybe I don't know, sharing too much, but that's me. Openness. Yeah. But we went through where I would share things, and then I felt like I wasn't getting anything back. And I believe we had conversations about this. It's like, I need to know a little more about you to build trust. And I'm just present to the conversation. I'm not judging it. But without any feedback or dialogue, I went into a story. So, it's like, we have to share pieces of ourselves. So again, we all have preferences for inclusion, control, and openness. But if we want to be in relationship, we have to learn to flex without self-abandoning. So that's a long answer to a question that you didn't even ask.
Yes. And I want to make a comment on the last part and say, well, I have a couple of things actually, but the first one is, I think I, as an individual, have had to bring more awareness to speaking my thoughts out loud. So it was something that we did have a conversation about, because I was listening when we were having those discussions, and I did have thoughts, and then there's a level of awareness that I'm not communicating those thoughts. And it's actually something that my children tell me all the time. They're like, are you going to respond? And in my head, I'm thinking, I already did respond.
Yeah.
The words have to exit your mouth in order to include them as a
so the key is communicate. Like, it's the space between us, right? Like, you think you're giving off a message. I feel like I'm being vulnerable and authentic by sharing pieces of me. And then we go into these stories, because the space between us, we aren't having an energetic exchange.
Yes.
And that's something to really keep in mind, is that it's energy in that has to flow in to build relationships. But it also, you touched on self-abandonment. It's not like giving up on totally who I am to be present to you, right?
Yes. And the other thing I wanted to say about that, because I know that you brought up the thing about inclusion and social environments. And I have recently had quite a powerful awareness about myself. I don't think they're going to end. I've been having them since I've been on this journey. And I think this journey of growth and development is I anticipate going to be present for the rest of my days. But now that my partner is someone who he likes being in social environments, but when he's had enough, he's had enough. And he has no problem saying he's had enough. He has no problem leaving a social environment if he's had enough, in a polite and, and his tolerance for being around social events is much lower than mine. So we now have to have conversations before we leave the house, where he'll say, okay, how many hours are you thinking that we're staying for?
Yeah.
But what I realized through being in relationship is, it's like this thing dawned on me that I have the option to leave social engagements, which I never knew before. And my whole life, I can remember really feeling that people would say things about me like, oh, Natalie is so fun. She's the life of the party. You know, oh, we're all going to have a good time. Like, oh, she's always the last one to leave, these types of things.
Mhm.
And my realization, this is back to self-abandonment, is that I, throughout the majority of my life, have stayed at many, 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 many things so much longer than I wanted to stay, because I felt this responsibility that, like, oh, everyone thinks I'm fun. Everyone thinks I'm, you know, the life of the party. And therefore I can't leave because
Right.
I have some kind of responsibility for the fun of these other people. And so my awareness is I have self-abandoned in social, you know, big social gathering environments for the majority of my life.
Right.
It's not saying I don't like being there. It's not saying that I'm not fun when I'm there, but the choice to stay
Mhm.
is often coming from this place, not what would feel good to me in the moment, you know, what is really in alignment with who I am and how I want to show up, but more, this is my responsibility to others. So
Yeah, it's so funny because last week I shared about going to the Roots and Blues concert, which 20,000 people love. I'm the one person that didn't. But the first night I went with my friends, and I usually take my own car because I'm the queen of the Irish goodbye. I just disappear. They all accept it. I'm an early to bed person. If I stay past 9 o'clock, people are like, oh my God, what's happening? I get up early in the morning. So I just I don't rely on people, but I decided that I would I wouldn't take my car, and that I would stay to the end. And the end could have been 2 a.m. And I was committed to doing it. And as it turned out, another person in my party wanted to leave. So I'm like on that. I'm like, let's go. I stayed till 12:30, which was, but that's the flexibility piece, because I had made a decision before going that I will stay until the end. And I didn't argue it.
Mhm.
I was willing because I made that decision. Is it my preference? No. But I wanted to hang out with my friends. So that's what I mean by flexible. And for you to be more conscious of, do I actually want to be here? Am I here because I think I need to be here for other people? And this self-abandoning thing, I think, is important to talk about. And I have a couple other thoughts that come to my mind with this. Is years and years ago, we had these when I was married, and my oldest son, Carson, was like 3 or maybe 5. He was young. Our other kids weren't born. And we went to Disneyland. We were so broke, 5 of us shared a hotel room. And the husband was really into like Superman and stuff like that. So we had to go on this crazy roller coaster. And I get car sick, I get road sick, I get boat sick, I get ride sick. So we went on it like the first time. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of done. I wasn't feeling great. He's like, you have to go on it. So I went on it 2 or 3 more times, and I was so nauseous and so sick. And I had like a fight with him. Like, I can't go on the ride again. You have to go on the ride. It's no fun if you don't go on the ride. And it's like, I completely had already self-abandoned myself. I was nauseous in Disneyland. And he was so angry with me. And I had this, it stays with me today, because I have this thing of like, it's for me, not against you. Like, it really had nothing to do with not wanting to be with him, not wanting to. And dude, you can go on the ride by yourself, and there's 3 other people that could go with you. And you didn't, but I was so tied into it that I went on it too many times, and then I was nauseous for the rest of the day. And that's a kind of a way of self-abandoning. And then recently we went on a river float with my friends, and I'm a person I'm certain some sort of beast is going to come out of the sand in the water and eat my feet and kill me. I'm going to die. And so I wore water shoes when we went on the float. And my friends were like, you got to take your shoes off. Like, what is wrong with you? You got to take your shoes off. And I said, you know what, gang, I am perfectly content with my water shoes on. I have felt my toes in the sand before. I'm good. And it's a silly example, but it's more like it's that peer pressure to abandon who you are. And yes, I've walked in the sand, everyone. I don't need to hear about that. But it was the power of choice, because I did what was true for me in the moment. And then recognize, are we over choosing ourselves in a way that we're not accommodating a relationship? So that's that balance. Is it a bridge or a barrier to balancing? And the self-abandonment thing is really, I feel like it's really important. And we've talked about this before, Natalie, because we teach coaches how to coach. And we talk a lot about presence. And even as a parent, being present, with a friend, being present, on a call, being present. And there's this, and I'd be interested in the chat if you've interpreted presence this way at all. It's like being fully in tune to someone. I'm 100% focused on you. So who in the chat can say, yeah, that's me. That's what presence is. I'm 100% focused on the person in front of me. Chat or don't chat. But anyway, but what that is, that's me. Okay, Trisha. Okay. That's self-abandoning. because I have to pay attention to what's happening inside of me when I'm interacting with you. So again, that's exchange. It's like presence is not a one-way street. It's like I want to notice what's happening inside of me when I'm in dialogue with you or focusing on my kids or whatever, because the goal, I think, in any exchange is to evolve in some way, like to leave a conversation or exchange a better person. It might not be measurable, but to have like a new insight or a new awareness. But by saying you've got my attention 100%, I'm abandoning what's happening inside of me. So I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but that to me is super important with coaching.
It is really important with coaching. The other thing that I think would be interesting to talk about is sort of the roles that we play in life and how we identify with those roles, and when and if that leads us down a path that has the potential for self-abandonment. So the one for me, and like when you talk about present to others, and I think about my first marriage, as my mother would call it, my starter marriage, where I feel like for me, it really was, I mean, I left my marriage just really feeling like I didn't know myself anymore, because I think I had, and totally unconsciously, self-abandoned so consistently. We were together for 18 years. So it's a long time, and I was a kid when we got together. But I remember when I came out of my marriage, at some point, it was like a year or so later, and I was re-listening to Byron Katie's Loving What Is. And, you know, different points in time when you revisit different things and different things pop for you. And the thing that popped for me that time is her question around, is it my business, your business, or God's business? And I just had this huge like whoosh of a realization of like, oh my goodness, how many years of my life did I choose? No one made me choose. Did I choose to spend living in your business? Like
I still do it. I'm so good at it. It's an art.
Sure, I still do it too. I'm not pretending I don't. But in this specific relationship for me, it was so pervasive that it was like, suddenly when I saw it, I was, you know, quite taken aback by how pervasive it was.
Yeah. And we kind of started off talking about this, and I do this exercise sometimes back when I did a lot of women's retreats, but oftentimes it comes up in the leadership work or the culture work, is, you know, these various roles that we play. And you talked earlier about, you know, when you're with one group of people, you feel very expansive. Another group, you can be silly. Like we sort of bring out a different identity for every group, but that's not self-abandoning. It's just bringing out a different part of us. It's self-abandoning when we forget that it's part of us, or we change who we really are to fit in. So there's nothing good, bad, right, or wrong about, you know, there's certain groups I can be super silly with, and other groups I put on a different hat or wear a different identity. But the important thing is they're all inside of us. And if we become over-identified with one of our roles, then when something changes in our life, it's kind of like the rug has been pulled out from under us. Although what's true is that can happen anytime anyway. But let's just go with the illusion of stability. And so, like, for example, if I over-identify with my kids, where do all my friends come from? They come from the parents of the kids in dance class or hockey. Those are my friends. And what happens when the kids move away? I've lost my identity. You know, if everything is in that, if my whole identity is in my church, like my mom really identified with the Catholic Church, very, very like schooled in a convent. We went to church regularly, like we were big time Catholics. And then I sort of remember through stories, because I wasn't super conscious of it, but when we moved to Canada from the States, because my dad had an affair, my mom was divorced and she couldn't get communion. And so her whole world unraveled. All her belief systems, she had to unravel it to find a new identity, but to still have her faith in God in a new way that allowed her to be a divorced person. So over-identifying with the church, over-identifying with your job. If you lose your job, like, who are you? And your job isn't like your car keys. You don't just like lose it. There's things that lead up to it that you might not have been aware of. But if we over-identify with one of these roles that we have, we lose our balance. So recognizing I am more than one thing. I can show up with this group of people and I can play that role, the more authentic I can be in it, the richer the relationships, right? It's not about now what face do I put on for this group? It's more reading the context, kind of read the room, dude. But the more we understand ourselves, the more authentic we can be in any experience. But just notice in yourself, if you over-identify with something. I totally over-identified with work. My work was my identity forever, like so intensely. And I had, when I was married, we first moved to British Columbia, and I didn't have a job. I didn't know who I was. And I was at home with my kid who was 3, and I didn't even know what to do with him because he was in daycare since he was like a month old. I was like, what do people do with these things? And I mean, that can be super offensive to other people, but everything was about work. And my work is very important to me. It's my passion, but I also really have found this place of balance. I would say 80% balance in my life, but it's less my identity now that I've sort of enriched other parts of my life. So that's, I don't know if anything about that stuck or was interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. So we were talking about this idea of self-abandoning versus, or not versus, but these two sides of the spectrum, essentially. Like, we spend time with different people bring out different aspects of self. Nobody is one thing.
Right.
In my head, Kathlenism, I've heard it a million times. I love it. It's so true. None of us are one thing. And then this place where, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm going to say it in case it might be. I would guess that most of us are self-abandoning in some aspect of our life.
I would agree with that.
I think if we looked for it, we would find at least one place where this is true. So as we think about that, the other part of what we want to talk about today was boundaries. So what exactly is a boundary, and how can we figure out how and when it's most useful to have a boundary? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think when it's going to sound weird, but maybe not. When it takes away from our soul, like, we do have to be around people. Like, I work with people who have very different political ideology than me. I mean, couldn't be further from each other. But I find a common ground because I think people are people and our values connect us. But I don't want to go hang out after hours, So a boundary for me is I have thoughts about different views, but I've learned to be more curious. Like, where did that come from? What? And then in my snarkiest of selves, I go to, what the hell happened to you? That you could believe that. But that's when I'm insecure. It's like, if I feel threatened by someone else's ideas, it's because I might be a little insecure in mine. And I try to go to curiosity. But boundaries are important when we're in a place that is eroding on our soul, and like a super toxic work environment, having, I love you too, Noreen, a super toxic work environment, having to kind of compromise ourselves every day, but then you got to feed your family, right? How do I balance these things that might be a competing commitment internally to my soul? It's a luxury to be able to say, well, just find another job. It's a luxury. So how do we have boundaries, and recognize when it might be eroding on us? I don't have a specific example or here's a tool, but I think about the expression, I didn't originate this, but people say I did, but I did. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I stole it from someone, but it's for me, not against you. And really looking at what am I surrounding my recharge space with? And if I constantly am in these spaces, like, I went through this whole thing with Facebook. And I don't know, I had like 4,999 friends. Like, I know that many people, but I really cleaned it up, because what I wanted on my Facebook was I wanted happy things. I want to know about people's family. I want to share that today is my son's 26th birthday. Happy birthday, Reed. You can follow him on Spotify, just Reed on Spotify. Like rap music. He's going to be dropping a new album soon. But I just want to share pictures, and I might have a view of certain thing every now and then, but I didn't want to be bombarded in my scrolling time with that. And one thing I do, which other people like you don't like, so I won't do this with you, is I like to watch true crime.
Mm.
It doesn't feed your soul. So it's recognizing that we have to be flexible, but we don't have to self-abandon. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about it? Because you asked the question.
Yes,
You probably
I do. So I think a boundary is a very interesting concept. And I think sometimes when we talk about boundaries, we can make the mistake of saying, you know, something is happening around us. We are not enjoying whatever this thing is. And so we need to communicate a boundary. We need to tell this person. And sometimes this is true, by the way, this isn't working for me. And, you know, in the interest of our relationship, what would work better could be this. I'm open to talking to you about it so that we can find a place, if you have that kind of relationship, where we do things differently. So it could be a verbally communicated boundary. But I think an underused idea of boundary is that it's not necessary to always verbally communicate. It could also sometimes not be appropriate to always verbally communicate. Depends on what the relationship is. It's one thing if it's a friendship or a romantic partner or a family member. It could be quite different in a work context, for example. But I do think that we teach people how to treat us. And we teach them through our behavior. So to me, it really comes back to that 100% responsibility piece. If I feel like a boundary is being consistently crossed, how have I, created it, promoted it, or allowed it? Because what's true is, if some spurious example, I'm always being given extra work and I always am working late, long hours, and I'm exhausted, verging on burnt out. Anytime someone asks me to do something, and I find that this is something that comes up all the time when we're in work environments, is people will say, certain types of people will say, yes, let me do it now. Yes, I can do it by the end of the day. Yes, give me half an hour and I'll get it back to you. Someone sends you an email, you're the kind of person that responds to every email within an hour. There's nothing wrong with that, in theory, not criticizing anyone who does that. But what's true is I'm teaching someone how to treat me. So it's like, I'm teaching you to expect an immediate response from me. I'm teaching you that I'm the kind of person that if you need something done, you ask me and you'll get it done quickly. So then it's much easier to ask me than to ask someone who says,
or do it yourself.
Yes, actually, I don't have time to do that today. But looking at my schedule, if you'd like me to work on that, I can have it to you by next Tuesday. And then that person gets to decide, if they're in charge of you, okay, I need it sooner, or are there things you can deprioritize, or I'm going to do it myself, or I'm going to ask someone else. So I think there's this, we teach people how to treat us through our actions as well as our words. And then the other one, which is a slight sidebar, is I have been in personal relationships with people where I feel like there is like emotional dumping that happens. I don't know if anyone's ever had that experience out there, where you've got someone in your life and you have a conversation with you and they just kind of unload all their baggage every time, you know, and it's not a two-way street. It's not sometimes when they're going through a hard time, it's just a consistent behavior. And to me, with this particular individual, when it was happening, I used to have this phrase that I would say internally, which was, that's not mine, I'm giving it back. That's not mine, I'm giving it back. And somehow, on an energetic level, it also changed my response. It also changed my behaviors. And lo and behold, after a period of time, this person wasn't getting what they used to get from me, which was, oh my goodness, that's terrible. Oh, how can I help you? Oh, let me carry your burden.
Allie, are you listening to this?
And the relationship changed itself because I was no longer providing the service.
You're doing a different dance, right? You're, you know, in our family, we two-step, you start to jive. Well, you're just moving the energy in a different way. And sometimes I find that when people, even in myself, when I'm trying to put up a boundary, I make it a wall in the beginning. And how can I make it more like a screen door that I can consciously be flexing on it as opposed to a wall? Or if people have been like me who are really not super social, opening it up and doing everything. Like we go to extremes to find our zone, which is, I think that's the dance of life. It's like, oh, that one was too far. Oh, it took, you know, you were in a marriage for 18, 19 years that you went, oh, wow, now I'm in a different relationship and everything feels so different, but I showed up differently. I took the time to pay attention and notice myself in it and expand my capacity to be in relationship. And that's what I think it is. One job to the next job, we can, behave in a different way. It's like a fresh start. But if we don't become aware of what we did and our part in it, because we're the common denominator in every part of our life, if we aren't able to see it, and I call it in a way being selfishly self-centered, and to notice ourselves in something and only in being selfishly self-centered can we see that space between. And like an example of that is this friend of mine who I've known her for a long, long time, but she never reaches out to me, like never, hardly ever, like truth. And I try to engage and blah, blah, blah. And so I just started to get kind of bitter about it because I'm a child. And then one day, out of the blue, I hadn't talked to her in months, asked me if I would take her to another city for a medical appointment. And I was so moved by her asking me, like, I thought, oh my God, like I felt so special because I really know her and I care about her and I love her. I just sometimes act like a child and I feel like, pay attention to me. Anyway, I took her and I took a day off and it wasn't easy to do. I took her bar back, never heard from her for a long time. And I was starting to get in my own, like, Jesus, like, sorry, if Jesus offends people, I shouldn't say that, but it's like, I started to think in my world, like, I can't believe she didn't even thank me. And I can't believe, like, I was so self-absorbed and so self-centered in it. And I needed that. I needed to go into that place to see, oh my gosh, Kathleen, you were taking her to an appointment because she was getting an MRI because they were fairly certain she had cancer. It's not about you, girl. And that whole process humbled me in my own experience of myself. And I could get to this place of compassion. Like, Kathleen, what is up with you? And I wasn't hating on myself. I don't mean that, but I just became very aware of how self-centered I was, because I don't think when we do something for other people, like, I think we always have to be conscious what's in it for us. And I always think there is something in it for us. I don't know if anyone is purely altruistic. I do it for the good of the people. The making people feel good feels good. We get that back. So there's something in it for us. So finding it and just recognizing in myself, I really want it to be acknowledged in this special way that was so incredibly selfish. And I was so humbled in myself. I didn't even need to have a conversation with her about it because I just was like, that burn that you get in your own skin when it's like, oh, I can't believe I went there, but I did. And so I learned about myself. So that selfishly self-centered is really going in. Was that too far? That one was. Did I let my boundary go too far? Not in that one, but another, like you're talking about in another situation. So when we go in, we can see, but we can't measure it without other people in our relationship. And that sort of brings us back to the start of this whole circle of it's energetic. Mm-hmm. And we test our boundaries. And the only person that has to respect your boundaries is you. People have heard me say that before. No one has to respect my boundaries. Mm-hmm. Only I do. And the key is sometimes I might let them go. But if it comes from a conscious place, then it's all about just being aware of what I'm doing and what I want to get out of it. Not good, bad, right, or wrong. Letting someone cross a boundary or hurt you. Okay, so what? We do that. So what's the learning and the awareness, and where can you take it next time? And I think that was sort of, maybe I'll let you sort of come together with your overall point of today, but really about, we talked a lot in the first two about ourselves and our awareness, our stories and those kinds of things. And then today it was about, okay, what's the point of all this? And how do I know where I am? It's because it's in relationship that we self-actualize, and that we push ourselves to the edges of our generosity, our compassion, our self-loathing. And the only way to test that is to test it and to engage in the world.
I love that. And I echo everything you're saying. And I've had many conversations with friends at different points in time where they've said things to me like, I just don't think I'm ready to be in a relationship because I need to do more work on myself, which I respect 100%. But what's true is if you are ready to do work on yourself, a relationship is perfect because it will literally act, whether it is closer friendships, whether it's a romantic relationship, but it just acts as this brilliant mirror for us if we're willing to look in it, because every tender place inside of us that has the ability to be triggered, that has the ability to be activated, every aspect of who we are shows up in relationship with others.
And there are buttons, right?
Yeah.
So it's about being self-aware, reframing a situation.
Yes.
Bringing forward a new identity that might create a different experience, because we're multifaceted. It's not about, I think we talked about this already. It's not about getting rid of the way you are it's like that way you were, that way I was, it helped us. It served us. That way other people are, it served us. So we're just putting it at the back of the bus. It's all good. I don't have to get rid of any part of me. I just might bring a new part forward. And the best way, I think, is to reframe a situation and be curious.
That was where I was going next, because I thought this is a great way to kind of round out this conversation for us to have a little discussion around, as we are in this adventure called life, where we have to interact with other people, sometimes tremendously joyful, sometimes tremendously challenging. How can we cultivate compassion for ourselves and other people as we are out there interacting with the world, being triggered, triggering others, and so on? That's
the question?
Yeah, that's the question. How can we cultivate more compassion for ourselves and others in this beautiful process we call life?
Well, like, to me, compassion is, there's 3 stages towards compassion. The first one is sympathy. And as my mom would quote whoever, if you want sympathy, it's between shit and syphilis in the dictionary. Sympathy is, oh, you poor thing, bless your heart, Empathy is a higher vibration. It's like, I can see you and allow space for whoever you are. But compassion is where I feel like I see you, I see myself in you, and I feel no obligation to solve anything. I see myself in you. Oh, I have felt fear before. That looks like fear looks to me. I don't know, depending on their variability in their emotion. It could be a number of things. Like last week, we talked about, I might think I'm angry, you might think I'm sad. So it's my reality has perceptions, but it's just, if I can see myself in you, that's where empathy starts to live. But compassion is really, and I don't have to fix it. I believe in you enough. It's like sort of the Byron Katie, my business, your business, and God's business. And my business is about knowing or testing my limitations. So that's,
as you're sharing that, I'm being reminded of, I was at an event, lots of different people speaking at this event, many of whom I knew, many of whom pretty notorious. And this one people was speaking, and I had carried a judgment about this individual for a long time, of her being not for me. Not a terrible person, but not for me. But I was in the middle of a row, and I wanted to watch the person before and I wanted to watch the person after, and it was packed. And I thought, I'm just going to sit here. And they announced her and she came on, and I found myself being like, I don't like you. I don't like the way you speak. I don't like the things you say. I don't find you to be authentic. Let me list all the ways in which I'm judging you, because obviously it's a very healthy way to have a good experience. And then I remembered this question, something like, how am I just like you? Or at the time, I think,
like me. Yeah,
just like me. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to sit here for the next 20 minutes anyway. So let's play this game with myself. Let's see if, just like me, how many different ways can I find that this person is just like me? And my first thought was, she's just not authentic. And then I thought, well, just like me. Sometimes
right now in the moment,
just not authentic. And then I thought, sometimes I just feel like she really puts on this mask. She just really puts on this mask, and she just pretends to be something that she isn't. I thought, oh, just like me. Sometimes I put on this mask and I really pretend to be someone that I'm not. And I continued down this track. And by the time she'd finished talking, I found that I'd actually really enjoyed. I stood up and clapped with everyone else. And I thought, that's very effective.
That's a if you spot it, you got it. But I love that. I learned that from Pema Chodron, that just like me, that person's really pissed off in traffic. Just like me, it's like, oh yeah, okay. All right. Well, that was good. I'm headed on a almost 3-week road trip, planes, trains, and automobiles. And Natalie, I'm going to see you in Carson in San Jose next week.
Yes.
Can't wait. I'm heading to Santa Barbara tomorrow for my good friend Jack Canfield's 80th birthday party.
Whoop, whoop.
So we're on the road for about 3 weeks, but we'll pop back on into your inbox for a few more conversations. I like your idea, Isabella. We should connect self-abandonment and burnout. That's an interesting topic. And we'd love to hear any thoughts or opinions that you'd like to share. Any things that you think you'd like us to talk about.
We read them all. We're a small but dynamic team. We read all your emails, and
I read my own emails. I read my own. Yeah, we all read our own emails.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate those of you who've been here 3 times in a row. I love it. Yes. The new ones that pop in and out, and then we get lots of comments on the replays. So that's kind of fun too. And we will be back.
We've been having so much fun with these, and we're having so much fun with those of you who show up and contribute and be part of the conversation, which is why the limited 3 series is going to become somewhat bigger in September, but we haven't decided how big. It could just be another 3.
We just commit to 3 because I'm commitment phobic, and we just see, is it still interesting after 3? We'll do 4 anyway. Love you all. Appreciate you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Back in school, life is getting back on track. September for me is my new year. I love September. It feels fresh. I love fall. So I will see you all back then. And thanks for showing up.
Yeah, much love to everyone. Thank you so much.